All right. I mean, so I haven't really thought about this recently because we just haven't been recording much. I think the last time we recorded was
4 weeks ago.
When we were driving around.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I posted that last week, and from there it's gonna be smooth sailing, It's gonna be every week. For sure.
And that one's blowing up. Word on the street. That one's blowing up.
It's true. Word on the street, everyone loves that one.
So
yep.
So we're back and better than ever.
Better than I guess something that we haven't talked about yet, but is kind of like a massive part of why we've become quite good friends, and something that unites us is our interest in language learning.
Have we not discussed this yet?
We have not discussed this. We've talked about countries. We've talked about everything else. We talked about how you speak Norwegian and whatever, and where we've been and all that kind of stuff. But we never really talked about our thoughts on language learning, of which I have many, and I know you have many.
Right.
So I don't know. I guess we can just start by if you want to go first, just talk a little bit about the languages you've learned, why, what happened with all that kind of stuff. Why you started learning a language, how you decided to study and stuff like that.
Yeah. So I think that for me, honestly, I feel like I had an interesting arc. Maybe I've said this on a podcast before, but I wasn't all that interested in other countries at all for quite a long time. Really until my sophomore year of high school, I would say, I was not all that tapped into other countries at all whatsoever. I was relatively good with geography and maybe GeoGuessr type applications, but I didn't really have much motivation to learn languages or whatever. But I had been taking Spanish since I was 6 years old, and
mandated by the school.
Right, exactly. And in that time, I was not very tapped into Spanish. I never really cared about it that much. I was just kind of going through the motions. I would turn in my assignments. I wasn't really the GOAT Spanish student by any means. And I think it all kind of changed when I became interested in Norway. Oh, it's just I was bored. It was COVID. I got interested in Norway. I was playing a lot more GeoGuessr. And just my worldly interest increased a lot, I would say. And I started doing Duolingo for Norwegian. And then in class in Spanish, I think that I became just a little bit more tapped in. And so I found myself quite quickly getting better at both languages. And for Spanish, I never really adopted a different strategy other than class. I think that, I'm kind of anti-class generally with languages.
I know.
I think that the biggest strength of classes is that it forces consistency, which is great. And one of the major pillars of what you need to learn a language, I think. But I just don't think that the structure of classes is very conducive to learning, with too many textbook exercises, everything being graded, so you get fearful of making mistakes, which I think is a big problem. These sorts of unnatural learning patterns, I think, cause issues. But with that being said, I still think that I actually got quite good at Spanish just from Spanish class. And it's not like I was doing a bunch of things outside of Spanish. I mean, I watched a few shows Casa de Papel, Money Heist, and maybe one or two others, I forget. But nothing crazy. Whereas by contrast, my Norwegian learning experience was all about, I actually got into the original language learning content that I got into was Japanese language learning content, but not with the intention of learning Japanese, just with the intention of learning more about how people learn languages. So because with Japanese, there's so many sweats. It's the thing to be a Japanese learning sweat. And so they call it all Japanese all the time is the sweaty community, AJAT. And they all have these YouTube videos about like how they lost all their friends and they were just doing Anki flashcard. Like literally you can go on here and watch these guys' arcs and it's crazy. Like no socialization, like quitting socialization for years to study Japanese. One of them, Matt vs. Japan, who's pretty popular.
Yeah.
He went to Japan on exchange. And then he was like, the host family was getting in the way of me doing my Anki. I hated it. And it's like, okay, bro, you lost the plot. You know what I mean? You lost the plot. Like, you're in Japan, you're speaking the language with locals, and instead, like, you want to be in your room grinding because it's more efficient or whatever. And so, like, I don't know. I'm not really, like, I don't really support the AJAC community. I think it's a little bit too sweaty for me. I think one of the big things that I think is beautiful about learning a language is just being able to talk to new people. That's my big motivation for learning languages. I think it's really cool to speak with someone in their native language. So yeah, if you don't care about that, then I think that you're not really doing it right. But with that said, there are positive things to take from their approach to language learning, which is all Japanese all the time is just what it sounds like. Listen to music, which I don't think listening to music is all that effective, but watching shows, reading books all the time is basically what it is. And so like for Norwegian, I wasn't all the time, but I was consistently first doing Duolingo to build fundamentals, which I think was effective, even though people might hate on that.
People do hate on Duolingo. Oh, yeah, especially now, but we can get into that.
Right. I think, it has strong points and it has weak points. I think for me, with particularly it being a Germanic language, you can build the fundamentals pretty quickly. And so I did like a year. I mean, I say quickly, I really did like almost a year of an hour a day, every day, which is a lot.
Right.
And then probably 6 months into that, I started mixing in watching shows. Maybe less than that. And I would watch with Norwegian subtitles. And I found that I picked up on it pretty well. I would in the beginning, I would have to, every time to watch like a 40-minute episode, it would take me almost twice that time because I would go back and watch the scene in English with English subtitles and then watch it again in Norwegian. And then however many times I needed to like pick out what words were meaning what. And, but I would watch children's shows to begin. And I just grinded. I read a lot of books that I already read in English, but with Norwegian translation. So like Percy Jackson. I read all the Percy Jackson books in Norwegian. And I really...
What's his name in Norwegian?
He is just Percy... Is he not just Percy Jackson? I forget.
I don't know. I feel like there were some names that were different, though.
There were definitely some names that were different, but... Yeah. No, there were definitely some names that were different, but Percy was the same, I think.
I see. Okay.
Yeah, because I also did read some Harry Potter, I think. And then I have a few other. I have Throne of Glass in Norwegian. I have like an originally Norwegian book. So I've read quite a lot. I've watched every single show that exists on Netflix with Norwegian dub. I've watched several originally Norwegian shows, and I've done a lot of Duolingo, basically. And was it effective? 100% yes.
Yeah.
It took I started it winter of my sophomore year really is when I started getting, or like maybe spring of my sophomore year is when I started getting serious. And by spring of my senior year, I remember having a phone call. And speaking to myself is another big thing that I did. Like I would speak to myself in Norwegian all the time, like on runs, in the shower, like always speaking to myself in Norwegian. And so even though I was never having conversations, I was used to saying the words at least. And so I still remember to this day, like the feeling of getting my first call. I called my friend, had never spoken to someone in Norwegian in my entire life. And I genuinely was on the phone for an hour and like, some English filler words for sure, or like loan words. But as a general rule, no need to go into English for any serious things for an hour. Was my first time ever speaking the language, which is really incomprehensible compared to like my Spanish experience. Where like at that point, I would say I was somewhat more conversational, maybe less deep bag on vocabulary and on like specifics of grammar. but somewhat more conversational than I was in Spanish. And that was after 2 years compared to 8 years or something. 10 years, really. So, yeah, I mean, I'm a big believer in the way that I learn Norwegian. I think it's super effective. And then since then, I haven't even needed to maintain it all that much. I watch shows occasionally. I talk to Norwegian friends here occasionally. And I have gotten like very good feedback from everybody that I speak to. Like, not to toot my own horn, but like I get like people frequently being like, "Wow, you're the best foreigner that I've ever heard speaking Norwegian ever," or
Right.
like I can sometimes trick people to think that I am Norwegian, which is like I could never do in Spanish.
Yeah.
And so like, yeah, I don't know. I'm a big believer. I think it really made me interested in language learning. Like I said, it spurred my interest in Spanish too, and I got much better at Spanish in my last 3 years than I did in the first 8. And so yeah, I really like language learning. Recently, I've been doing Japanese some. Japanese though is like a whole different can of worms, I guess, because there's just like a whole different set of challenges where you have the alphabet, you have the kanji, because you can't read it. Reading was like a big part of my formative learning for Norwegian, where I'd read the subtitles, and then it's like, okay, all of a sudden I can't read subtitles, so you have to pick out more sounds. It feels like I'm just like starting from less. But with that said, I've never been as consistent with Japanese as I was with Norwegian. And so like I really do want to give that a chance. I think I'll learn relatively fast, but it's just hard because when I was learning Norwegian, it was remote school, COVID. Whereas right now I have a lot of things going on. And so like just pouring in an hour plus of Duolingo every day and other learning is quite difficult. But I do think, yeah, the difference is that the learning curve is very steep in the beginning of a language that uses different grammar, different characters than your native one. And so like getting over that part is really hard. Because now when I try and listen to even easy podcasts, it's like, you know, you get lost and then you can't follow it. And if you can hardly even follow the sounds they're saying, like how much are you really absorbing? I don't know. My approach with Norwegian was to build the fundamentals first and then listen. I guess somewhat unlike like native learning when you're a baby, but yeah, I don't know. So yeah, that's my language story. But on to you, Nico.
Yeah, before we get onto me though, yeah, if you knew Callum during this period of his life, it was very interesting because he was like, you could tell he was tapped into the Norwegian. He would talk about it often, but he wasn't an AJAT world, you know. He wasn't like he was an ANAT. He wasn't like not talking to me or anything,
Right?
Because he wanted to make sure that his Norwegian wasn't like impeded or anything. And so yeah, it was really interesting to watch. I guess I didn't really get to watch it, but it was just like I saw the evolution over time, and it felt like kind of crazy because it was like I kept wondering, like, is this guy just like insanely cracked at learning languages, or like what's going on? Like it felt like to me like all like a bunch of stars aligned, and it was like this guy is like destined to learn Norwegian in like a year or whatever. Because yeah, like you said, you pretty quickly were able to like have full conversations with people, and Norwegian sounds, you know, it doesn't sound much like English. So hearing you speak Norwegian, I've heard you speak like a number of times, and you sound, I don't know like what fluency sounds like, but you sound quite fluent to me. And
no,
I think
yeah, it's definitely like foreign. Even like when I, even when I first started hearing myself speak it, it's like you feel like you're speaking like some sort of like weird old tongue or something. Like like I don't know, it feels very random, and I was astounded by my own progress as well. And so like I really don't know. That's kind of why I want to like actually dedicate myself to the Japanese, like once I can find that time, because I'm curious.
It might just be cracked, yeah.
Nobody learns Norwegian, so that's like I have very few points of comparison for Norwegian. Like I know a few people who have tried learning Norwegian, and I would say that I am better than them. like I know one guy at Stanford who his grandparents were Norwegian. He like grew up going there in the summer, but was never really trying to learn it. Then he decided he wanted to lock in, like studied it for 6 months, then moved to Norway for a year, lived there for a year, has since been back for like a year and a half and still studying somewhat. And like I'm definitely better than he is. But I don't know, like I think I was maybe a little bit more dedicated as well. So it's hard, and that's like the one guy I can compare to. So there's just very little comparison. With Spanish, I was like good among my classmates.
Yeah.
But I wasn't the GOAT. But also I never really employed my own learning with Spanish. So the Japanese, I am quite interested if I lock in. Like, will I progress faster than all these like AJAT type people? Maybe, maybe not. I don't know. But yeah, I am interested.
For their sake, I hope you don't. For their.
I know, if they give up all their friends,
their effort surely goes somewhere, right?
You would hope.
Like to think.
You would hope.
Yeah. I guess my story is like very different, just because I grew up in a very sort of global context with like I would say from very young, just a very like global perspective, and also interest in other countries, mainly because my mom was not born in the US, so she was born in Taiwan, and then she immigrated to Latin America, and then finally to the US. So pretty unique, not unheard of. I've met a couple other people who are like me, who are, their parents did the same thing that my mom did, but like pretty unique trajectory to go from there.
Right.
And then from the time I was born, essentially, I was spoken to in Spanish. So Spanish was kind of like my somewhat my first language. Definitely when I was young, like English and Spanish, I was essentially like completely bilingual. Maybe even more in Spanish when I was younger, because I did get put into like supplementary English classes at some point. That was like when I was super young, so it didn't really affect anything later. But then when you're in school and stuff, you have to speak English, so I basically distanced myself from Spanish so that I could, better fit in with everyone and talk with everyone. Still took Spanish classes and everything, but Spanish class was never very challenging for me.
Right.
But I did, I liked taking the classes. I think they were interesting. But I guess in terms of like more formal like language learning, in terms of like my conscious like desire to actually learn languages, because Spanish had just been a part of my life for so long. It was really when I got into high school and started learning Mandarin. My mom, even though she's from Taiwan and does speak Mandarin, she never taught it to me. I'm not exactly sure why. I've asked her that a couple times now.
That would have been chill.
And it would have been so chill, but I get it. It's like kind of a lot of work to like teach a child how to speak a language, and you're already teaching them two, so whatever. Or I guess teaching in the quote unquote, because you don't have to teach them much because they kind of just do it. But still,
go language learners.
They're so good.
Give me that back.
Insane. I know, right? But yeah, so like Mandarin is like so different from English and Spanish, and I guess just being acquainted with it in high school and like in a classroom setting, so I got kind of stuff explained to me like pretty concretely, like how stuff worked and all that kind of stuff, and I picked it up like quite fast, and I'm not gonna, I'm not like the best Chinese speaker in the world still, and I never really was. I wasn't like the best Chinese learner. I kind of slacked off every once in a while, but just comparatively to classmates, it was going pretty well for me in Chinese class. And I'm not really gonna attribute that to my mom either, because I didn't really, and I mean I guess I sometimes spoke Chinese with her, but it wasn't too often that we ever actually like discussed in like things at length in Chinese. It was always like maybe Chinglish. But yeah, I guess aside from that, I kept taking Chinese classes in college, and then very recently I started taking Japanese classes at college as well. Um, so yeah, I've done a lot of like classroom instruction, language learning, and I do agree that like it's not necessarily necessary um, in order to learn a language, but like you said earlier, it helps a lot with consistency, and that's sort of one of the main things I struggle with is just like self, uh, like self-imposing consistency.
Right.
Like I really would not learn as much as I should if I were to like put it all on myself, and so having a place to do that is like really beneficial for me. But would I be taking classes if I wasn't in university and already like paying for tuition? Like probably not. So all the like the formal classes I've taken have all been in like the context of like education, like an education I'm already paying for, or some sort of exchange program, or like public school. So I don't think I would pay for private lessons just personally. I don't know.
Yeah. And so with your Chinese or Mandarin, do you think that it has gotten, where do you think that you saw the most growth? Was it while you were in China? Was that your most accelerated growth?
Easily. I mean, I think there's like a good, at the beginning of when you're learning a language, there's like a very, very sharp like increase in how much you know, right? But then in the grand scheme of things, you still know absolutely nothing. But you know like a lot more than you used to. So
yes,
it's like it feels good
because like a lot.
You learn all this stuff so fast, like the alphabet and basic vocab and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, so what was I saying?
But
for Mandarin,
in your time in
like where has it gone? Yeah, in China, like I think specifically with, or not even specifically with Chinese, but just with any foreign language, like what's really going to distinguish you from other foreigners is just being like speaking like the people from the country in terms of how you
pronunciation,
enunciation, but also just how you like the way in which you form ideas and how you talk about certain things.
Yeah, I think that's huge.
And not even just from like a grammar perspective, but just from like
word choice
or word choice. Saying the right thing at the right time, and there's a lot of really small nuances that you would really never know unless you. Well, I guess you picked it up mainly from like TV and podcasts and stuff. But for Chinese, that was mainly, for me, it was just living there for a couple months. And, a couple months is not that long, but it is, like, I already had quite a good basis in the language.
Right.
So.
And so for your Mandarin, have you done, like, what's your ratio of when you were in your prime learning times from, I don't know, end of high school into college before your exchange? Were you doing much self-study or mostly just your class and your homework? Were you ever like watching shows on your own, doing Anki, these sorts of like self-study type methods, or no, not really?
Yeah, I'm trying to think. I mean, end of high school, definitely not really doing much self-study on that. But once I started college and was taking classes there and was starting to go to China and Taiwan, I think the motivation for self-study really kicked off, and I was, on Anki a lot, and then also trying to watch, Chinese, Taiwanese dramas, or like Chinese anime, that kind of stuff.
Right.
Yeah.
Shout out LinkClick.
Yeah, LinkClick's good. Yeah. and they make some good stuff. But yeah, I do think that stuff helped a lot as well. But I would also normally just, I guess not really for the drama, because I don't really enjoy them, but for Link Click, for example, I watched that with English subtitles first, and then I watched it with Chinese.
Yeah. Fair. Yeah, I think that's a good method, honestly, because a lot of my stuff that I was watching was either a children's show, for example, which it's like, obviously it's very basic, or alternatively, it was something that I'd already seen, which I think does give a lot of context, because it's like, you kind of want something where it's like you didn't just see it, you didn't just watch it, or didn't just read it. So it's like, you're not remembering exactly what happened, like exactly what sentences were said, maybe. But you just have like this general guiding idea of like, okay, in this scene, I remember they were discussing this. And so like that can just keep you on track. Because I really do think that a big thing, and like I said, this is kind of where I've struggled in Japanese a little bit so far in the small amount that I've done, is that like sometimes I just lose track of where I am if I'm trying to listen to a podcast or whatever. And that's kind of why I think podcasts are a little tough too, because you have no other input. You don't have visual input to keep you on track, or whatever that might be, and it's going at its own pace. So like books, you can do at your own pace. You can reread as much as you want. That's easy. Shows, you have visual input to keep you on track. Podcasts have nothing, right? The benefit of podcasts is that you have very consistent speaking, which is just like more consistent dialogue than if you're watching a show where, like there's music and whatever. Those types of things get hard. But I do think that watching something that you already have context on can just be like an additional thing to keep you in the loop and keep you a little bit more on top of what's happening. And like, as long as you can just stay kind of following what's going on, I think that's a big piece in like getting more value out of less time. Because I think you can learn. Like right. there is like the brute force solution, which is you learn with like just so much content. Like that's what babies do. You know what I mean? Like there's no textbook, there's no nothing. You just learn with a ton of content. That still works, but you have to have so much exposure time. In that case, like if you want that to work, you need to listen to podcasts 24/7, or whatever it might be, and like that's just not feasible for most people. So instead, I do think that if you want to get more bang for your buck, then you want to be doing stuff that you can really keep on top of and try and get value out of every word that you're seeing or hearing or whatever that might look like. So yeah, I don't know, but yeah, the classes are valuable. I think I struggle with the classes thing because, like you said, like at the end of the day, like for example, with Japanese, I've been wanting to learn Japanese now for probably like a few years that I have had some motivation to learn Japanese, and if I just started classes a few years ago, I would definitely be far ahead of where I am now. But I always was like, oh, but I can do it better on my own, which I think I can, but will I, given my other constraints in my life? I don't know. So I think that's like my, like, I don't know. If I was like giving advice to someone, I think it's basically that if you think you have the time and the willpower to do it independently, I think you should. I think it builds better fundamentals. And because like you were saying with speaking naturally, I think that's the thing that I do in Norwegian the best. Like I'm sure there are kids that have like learned Norwegian formally, maybe not too many, that might have a better concept of like technically grammar or like technically they might have a larger vocabulary. I don't know if they've done a lot of vocab quizzes or something, but I think that I speak Norwegian like extremely fluently, which is exclusively a product of the fact that I learned it in a very natural context. So like I've always spoken with the tendencies of native speakers. Like even from my first times that I was speaking Norwegian, I was speaking with like the little quirks that like at least young people use. Like I tend to speak very casually in Norwegian, for example. So like I'm not as good at speaking formally. Like even if I'm trying to speak to someone formally, I have to like keep myself in check very consciously. Like okay, don't add that to the end of the sentence because that's a habit that young people have that you shouldn't do if you're speaking to someone in a formal context.
Right.
Because I just learned everything informally. And so all I had to do to speak natively was just replicate exactly the input that I had been receiving for many, many hours. Which I think is an easier process than if you have to build all your fundamentals on textbooks and, you know, like these like pre-recorded audios that are whatever we all grew up doing in Spanish that are like rough.
Capítulo 3.
Yes, exactly. Those things. And then you have to, you know, retrain those habits. That's kind of a tricky thing. So yeah, I don't know. I think that in that sense, I do think there's a lot of value to self-study if you can trust yourself to stay on top of it.
Yeah, definitely. Although I think when we talk about self-study, it's kind of hard not to mention Duolingo and sort of language learning platforms. And then also maybe language learning influencers at the same time.
Right.
Yeah, so there's been a lot of controversy around Duolingo, especially recently, for the fact that they've been using AI to make a lot of their lesson plans. You know, I think if you're using Duolingo expecting to come away fluent, and I know that's kind of the image they give, right? It's the advertising that they use. They're gonna say, yeah, 10 minutes on Duolingo is equal to however many hours of classroom instruction, you know. But if you're actually like believing that, like that's just, I don't know. Like I've never treated it as a stand-in for any formal learning or, you know, actually putting in the work on complex topics. You're just not going to learn that on Duolingo. They don't take the time to explain things to you. They just kind of throw exercises at you. But that makes it like really good for, you know, just reviewing stuff that maybe you forgot or vocabulary that is pretty commonly used. You know, a lot of the vocab is generally centered around like daily life or like specific topics like that. And so in that way, I don't think it's a bad tool. I just think it can be used poorly if you like it would expect yourself to be fluent after 1,000 days, you know?
Yeah. Well, I don't know. I honestly, you know, I'm kind of biased in favor of Duolingo, obviously, because I had a good experience where I learned a lot on it. And once again, I think it's a little tricky to know how representative that is for all languages on Duolingo. I don't know. That's why I want to experiment with Japanese on that. But I think that the biggest takeaway for me is just that there really are no like true shortcuts in language learning. And so like that's what people fall for with Duolingo, is that it's a shortcut. Like it's not a shortcut. It's just another means of learning a language that still requires a ton of time input. So like I do think that you can get good off Duolingo. I did get good off Duolingo, but I did it again an hour a day every day for like over a year. Like that is so much time, so much more than other people are putting out on Duolingo. Like people don't understand that like that is not the same thing as your 10 minutes a day. Like your 10 minutes a day is doing so little comparatively, and it's like there's a difference between like going through the motions of your lesson and like being locked in. Like I was waking up every morning and like very like consciously trying to learn for an hour and doing my exercises in a dedicated way. And so like that type of thing, I do genuinely think you can learn on Duolingo. Because at the end of the day, it's just sentences that you're having to produce or listen to or speak over and over and over again, in somewhat in the same way that Anki would be. Like maybe their algorithm is less scientifically supported than Anki or whatever that might be. That's why I think Anki can be good too. The only problem with Anki is that I find it a little bit easy to like click through Anki, whereas like Duolingo forces some production at least.
Right.
So like that's what I like about Duolingo as opposed to Anki. I do think there's value to Anki as well. Like the sentences are better. Like I download a lot of decks on Anki sometimes that have like speaking associated with them, so you can hear a native speaker say it instead of the Duolingo voiceover, which is valuable. And they're just like better sentences. You don't run into like weird sentences as often on Anki. So like, or like, yeah, also for reference on Anki, I'm mostly doing sentences.
Right.
For better, for worse. I don't know what I would honestly need to review the literature about whether that's my best strategy or not. But yeah, I don't know. I think that basically any language learning tool where you're having to look at sentences over and over that are authentic sentences, produce, listen to them, speak, whatever, you can learn. I don't think that the tool is like necessarily evil or useless. It's just that, like all other tools in language learning, like it's not a shortcut for class. Like class just has some dead time. Like class, like, okay, yeah, maybe some of the time you're talking to your friend in English or like whatever. Like those type of times are not effective for you. And so like if you can go on Duolingo and like just rep it out, then you're gonna just get more bang for your buck in the same amount of time as if you did 45 minutes of class. But once again, can you get yourself to do that boring Duolingo every day for that amount of time period? You're probably not doing it, is the thing. And so if you're not doing it, then don't expect that you're going to get good outcomes.
I think, I think mindset is so important. I think, especially like your experience really speaks to that. It's just you really just got to be locked in. And not that I think you absolutely have to be locked in. Like there's not like, I mean, I guess there are kind of some wrong ways to learn a language, but I'm like, if you're taking the time to learn a language, no matter what that is, if you're just on Duolingo for 5-10 minutes a day, I think you're doing yourself a favor. Like you're not losing anything by, I mean, I guess you might lose some time, but realistically that time is otherwise going to be spent on Instagram Reels or something.
Right. So it's still productive. We're still counting that as productive.
It's a win-win. Like you get some knowledge about another language, maybe a little bit about another culture, become a better person overall. So I don't know. I don't like nitpicking when it comes to language learning.
Right. I agree. I think
it's just like I have opinions. Just, you know, I'm a major in linguistics, so. But
yeah,
you know, it's just I think at a base level, like anyone who's trying to learn a language should be commended. It's like not easy at all.
Right. Definitely not. I think, yeah, at the end of the day, like my overarching conclusion with language learning is just that the best way for you to learn a language is the way that you're going to be consistent. Like hands down. Because you can do the most effective thing, but if you're not going to do it, like I said, every single way you learn a language is going to require a lot of time and effort. That is a prerequisite to learning a language. You can't just gamify it and have it be fun and easy and not boring at all times, unfortunately. That's just life. And so whatever way that you can find it the most enjoyable, such that you're going to keep doing it and putting in hours, is the best way for you.
Yep. 100%.
So yeah, that's
yeah. It sounds a little obvious, but I think people tend to lose sight of that you just don't be worried about the best way of doing something. You just need to find the way to do it, you know.
Right. Yeah, I think that like, some people get lost in exactly that. They're like trying to like they'll spend more time looking at the YouTube videos about how they should learn, trying to pick out the best specific method, and it's like you could arrive at that dialed in method and then you don't like it and you don't do it and you just wasted all of your time. Like I think you have some intuition for what you think might be sustainable for you, and if you can gain that intuition, like just do it, start it, hold yourself to it. Like that's the only way you're going to learn a language.
Yeah, although I do think it's not terrible to do, but it's it's not going to be as efficient. Maybe you're a beast, I don't know, but learning multiple languages at the same time is I don't know. Like, especially from zero, I think a lot of people on Reddit in particular will post about, I'm learning X language. What are you guys learning? Are you really learning all of these languages?
Yeah, the simultaneous thing, I don't know.
I speak all of these languages. Do you like? And I think this kind of speaks to how some language, I wouldn't even call them language learning YouTubers. They're kind of just language flex YouTubers. They just go around
that's definitely
speaking languages to
I speak your language
passerby. I speak your language, and these are very impressive people because knowing so many languages, even just a couple basic phrases is like not easy. But when you're marketing it as I am fluent in all these languages, and all of you who are watching are not as knowledgeable as me, and you will never get to this point. I don't know. That's kind of like the vibe I get from them. But I don't know. Maybe I'm just insecure.
No. I agree with you 100%. I mean, like you said, like these people are impressive. What they do is impressive and unique. But me personally, it's not the direction that I would take towards language learning, just because, yes, their understanding of each language is not that deep. Like, they always repeat the same type of conversations, the same type of like, hey, how are you? They memorize their phrases, and it's kind of a separate skill, right? Like phrase memorization versus being dialed in on pronunciation. All of the the little things that make you actually fluent at speaking a language, like those are not the things that they're optimizing for. They're just optimizing for the number of languages they can claim to speak. Which, yeah, I think I try not to like pay attention to those people in a serious way in the language learning community, because I think it's an entirely different skill.
I think it kind of gives, I don't know, maybe I'm wrong, but it just gives the wrong image for how people should think about language learning. And even the people, let's say they're very good at one language, they go to whatever Chinese restaurant or go to foreign country, and they start speaking the language, that kind of content as well sort of bothers me in a way that is hard to explain and articulate.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the root question there, it becomes like, so basically, yeah, I guess the root question there becomes, what do you think, the question I want to ask you is, what do you think that the value of learning languages? Why do you learn languages? Mm-hmm. Yeah, because I think that's probably what's at the root of why that content annoys you.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, so the main languages I know are just very family oriented, Mom came from Latin America, so I know Spanish, or I guess she lived in Latin America for most of her life, so that's why I know Spanish. And then originally from Taiwan, so I have a lot of family there, and then that's the main motivation for learning Mandarin. So that was originally sort of why I learned languages, and then I think from knowing those and seeing the benefits that you can get from it, just in terms of when you visit a country, you are treated not like much better, but you feel a lot better about yourself as a tourist, and you can tell that the people like to talk to you in their language. And I think when a YouTuber is sort of taking advantage of that to brag in a way about how good they are at a language, it feels a little wrong, because yeah, you're white in like Shanxi, China. Like, no one's gonna expect you to be able to speak Mandarin well. But if you studied it for a couple of years, then
This isn't that crazy.
They're gonna be impressed. Like they're, it's not. And some of these, white guys, like they're very good at Mandarin. It's just I think when you make it your career and that's sort of like the thing that you're making money off of, it just feels a little strange. I don't know.
Right. Yeah, I agree. I think it is a tricky thing. I think I'm torn in two directions here because I am like kind of in support of in the modern day making a living off of doing things that you find genuinely interesting and fun. And so it's like, I don't even know, like, for example, I think the prime candidate of discussion here is whatever his name is, the guy who learned Chinese, and he has a lot of these clickbaity videos in Chinatown or China.
Xiao Ma.
Yeah, Zhao Ma. Yeah. So it's like, and I'm sure, like, I don't know, I'm sure if you ask him why he learned Chinese, it's not to make clickbaity videos. Well, obviously. And I think, you know what I mean? And, like, that's the tricky thing is it's like, I'm sure he has good intentions, and I'm sure that he's gotten a lot of, like, truly valuable things out of the language that are, completely separate from his YouTube channel. But then it's like, okay, then he found a way to make a living off of it, which is like, in some ways, flexy and arrogant, but also, like I said, like coming from my perspective of maybe, we should take advantage of this modern era to do something that you find valuable. And maybe he inspired a lot of people to learn languages, at least. I don't know. That's maybe not good. I don't know, even though the content itself is sometimes a little bit extra. I don't know. I do think it's kind of like a tricky line there.
Yeah, I don't know. It's, I guess the problem is not necessarily with the person in that case. It's probably more directed towards like a general argument against social media and what kinds of content people like and what gets clicks and how hard you have to fight in order to get noticed on any online platform. And it's entertaining to watch old Chinese people be very surprised.
Right.
Even though it's just but I do think these sentiments are maybe not widely shared, but definitely prevalent because people do meme on him and a lot of his sort of contemporaries, I guess you could call them.
Right. Yeah, it is interesting. I think, for me, I think that the value of learning a language, like I think this is a good example, I guess, is that, there's obviously unlocking like a new population that you can speak to. Like I don't know. The biggest things for me learning language are connecting to people and like connecting to a new culture. I think because obviously the languages that I've learned, I have no connection to at home. Like nobody in my family spoke either of those languages. No one in my family had ever been to a country that spoke one of those languages. Like zero connection at all whatsoever.
Right.
And so, like all of my motivation for learning language had to come from externally. And for Norwegian, which is the one that I initially became super interested in, like, I don't know, originally I found a lot of value in just because I wasn't speaking to anybody. So originally I found a lot of value in just learning it on my own, just like as a skill. I thought that was fun, like just feeling accomplished in that sense. But then also because I was like very involved with like learning about the culture, like I said, like tapped into like at least the young culture. So, I was like, my friend sending me like YouTube mini series that are like what young people are watching in Norway. And so then it's like, you're like kind of learning about the culture, the history, like kind of what people are up to, getting tapped into a new social scene, if you will, even though you're not actually talking to the people, which like I always found very interesting. And so then I came to Stanford And then my experience at Stanford has also been super interesting because, another reason that I think people would be surprised about, because one of the things that people use for language learning for rather, is like looking very objectively, like, okay, like what languages should I learn? Spanish or Chinese, because there's like so many native speakers. So I'm just unlocking this whole world that I could speak to. And obviously I was on the complete, and I don't think that's a wrong perspective at all, but like I was on the complete opposite end of that spectrum, learning a language where there are like 5 million native speakers and all of them speak English, basically. So it's like, in terms of new people that I unlocked speaking with, that number is like probably in like the thousands, maybe like tens of thousands, maybe including a lot of grandparents or something. Like really a low figure as far as what languages could be. But despite that, I think it's had a huge impact in the sense that, all the Norwegians I meet are very excited that I've learned the language. And so coming to Stanford, I literally had like my freshman year made like, I don't know, somewhere between like 5 and 10 friends that are from Scandinavia, who like I would speak to consistently. And then as of this last year, there's been a Scandinavian society founded here that I was like, my friends who were Scandinavian were like, oh, you should totally be a part of this society. And so now I am, and like I go to all these events, and there I've met like tons of new students, tons of new people, and I genuinely think it's been a very rewarding thing to meet those people and like make those connections. And so I really feel like, I've like gotten my time back, like my investment back, like so many times over. And like I would like to live in Norway at some stage, but even if I never did, I still, like made profit, if you will. Like I've gotten so much out of Norwegian with people I've met, the learning. And the other thing that I think is really big with languages is like, I feel like it's a little easier to understand the perspectives of a different country if you speak the language, which is like, because it like the whole experience of learning a language, like not only are you learning the language, but you're learning the culture and you're meeting the people, and like all of those things tied together are what allow you to like truly better understand the way that people from a different part of the world think. And so like I think one of the biggest examples of this for me in Norwegian is like Norwegian people, for a variety of reasons, it's a very affluent country, and so people are privileged and have these opportunities or whatever it might look like, but they are very like tethered to this idea of doing things in the name of happiness rather than prestige or money. And I wasn't really always on board with that. Like when I was younger, I was always trying to like get rich, do the job that would make me the richest. And I genuinely think like that perspective has changed like massively as a consequence, like not exclusively as a consequence of Norway, but in large part as a consequence of my connection to Norway. Because as I met people, talked to people, was exposed to the country, I was just like very exposed to this different perspective on life rather than like the go-getter Bay Area grind. And even now, like when I go to Scandinavian Society, and like if I talk to my American friends here, like, oh, what are you doing next year? Like most of the people are like locked in. And then I talk to people at Scandinavian Society, and they're like, I don't know, like I kind of want to go sailing around Norway for a year, and like I'm gonna do a gap year and do this or that. And it's like much more like loosey-goosey. Once again, there's a lot of confounding, like they're privileged and whatever. But in general, it still stands. Like there's just this very different perspective. The other issue in Norway that like I feel like changed my perspective a little bit, I remember, was just like social good. So like I still remember having this like very pivotal conversation with my friend in Norway when I was there after my senior year of high school, where we were talking. And so when I first got to Oslo, I was alone, and I took the train, and there was no person to check your tickets, just like a trust system basically. And so like I remember bringing this up with my friend like a week later, And I'm like, what's the deal? Like, everyone must just not buy tickets, because like I felt like I got scammed. Like, it was like the tickets were super expensive, and then there's no one checking my tickets. And like if that was in the U.S., like I'm probably not paying my ticket realistically.
Yeah.
And I was like, so what's the deal? No one pays for the tickets or what? And like, who knows how true it is? But he was like, no, everyone pays for their ticket. Like, and this sounds like very idealistic. I feel like it's like when people idolize like Japan too, the same thing where it's like, no, everyone has faith
Picks
in
up
the
the
society.
trash.
You know what I mean? Like, yeah, exactly. Like, it's like, no, not everyone's perfect or whatever. That's not what I'm trying to say. But certainly there is like a little bit more belief in the government and the societal systems, trust in the systems there in Norway. And once again, there's less poverty, so that plays a big role, etc. But you know, like his perspective, honestly, like from the bottom of his heart, was that like he should do his part in paying that because he could afford it, and that was the best thing to do. And I was like genuinely surprised by that. As like a young person, maybe you don't have a ton of money, like wanting to contribute like that, but he just has that faith and connection to Norway. And an adjacent issue is with the prison systems in Norway. They're like famously forgiving. Yeah. Like you see these memes of like, is it an apartment or is it a Scandinavian prison? And often the prison is nicer looking than the apartment. And sentences are very light. You can really look up, they're pretty fascinating. YouTube videos on these things. There are several people across Scandinavia that have like these YouTube things filmed on them where it might be like literally a murderer, like genuinely a murderer who's in like an open prison or something, which basically means it's a house. Like some of these guys, they'll literally give them a house and they like bike back and forth from their house. They work. It's like basically like you're not in prison. You're just monitored. That's the only difference. And you have check-ins and whatever. And like some of them are like in a more formal prison system, but even some of those guys can leave to go to work. Or there's like one guy in Finland, I know that like there's this YouTube series where he like goes for his ice bath every morning in the lake and he's like a murderer and whatever. And so like it seems really crazy. And it's because like there's like kind of this very like vengeful perspective that people deserve punishment in the US. I find like you've done something wrong, you deserve to be punished. And in the East,
it's not just
too.
America,
it's not. It's not isolated to America. Like Eastern countries are actually, in many ways, worse for this type of thing.
More.
I've watched like and you see that in media too. I mean, like, well, first of all, you have places like Singapore or something where there's like insane rules for everything. I mean, the Middle East is really crazy for this type of thing. Even Japan is very strict on this type of thing. But then in media, like I've watched several like Korean shows, and like vengeance is this very, very, very like prominent motif throughout these shows, where it's like, you know, someone does something to someone, and it's like they go and kill everyone in that person's family or something insane. Like genuinely, like that's like a common thing. Like this very revenge centered, get what you deserve mentality, which, you know, I think is in some ways natural, right? Like, like that's a natural human knee-jerk reaction to someone does something bad to you. You want to get revenge. I understand that. But my friend in Norway was like, I was like, look, like, you really believe in the system? You think that murderers should be getting these good conditions or whatever it might be? And he, once again, like genuinely from the bottom of his heart was like, yes, like I think it's the best thing because simply put, there's better reincarceration rates or like lower reincarceration rates. Like there are less crimes being committed. And when people get out of prison, they're committing less crimes. Like your system in the US, like, yes, you punish people, but then many of them you still do let out. And then guess what happens? They do it again. So now you just doubled down on the damage. You know what I mean? Like, what if you could just actually reform those people and so they don't commit these crimes? Like, that would be great, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
And it's more complicated than that because
of course there's a lot of societal factors and
factors. You know, it's different populations, committing the crimes, different reasons.
But we're just
for
talking about
committing the
like
crimes.
just the treatment, just supporting good treatment of murderers would just never go over well here.
Right,
example.
exactly. Like that would just be like, yeah, we would have to see, you would have to run the experiment and see, like,
I think even if they ran it.
No, I'm just saying, like, we would even have to see if we completely just swapped out the prisons in America for Scandinavian prisons, we would have to see if the reincarceration rates actually drop in the way that they have dropped in Scandinavia, because it's a whole different system. But even in the case that they did drop, I'm saying that I don't think that would be supported by much of the American population, because it's not about it dropping. It's about people should get what they deserve.
Yeah.
And that's like, even to this day, it's still like, okay, if someone seriously harmed one of my family members, and then you're telling me they're going to get treated well in prison and they're going to be out in 2 years, like, that's a hard pill to swallow, naturally. Right? But once again, my friend in Norway was like, I asked him that question. I was like, for real, you're telling me, like, someone murdered someone in your family, you want to see a YouTube video of them living it up, like going to their classes and saying that they're going to be out in a few years? And he was like, like, obviously that would be a hard thing to watch, but at the end of the day, if that's the price I have to pay for, like, societal benefit, then yes. And again, like, he just sounded 100% serious. And it was like a very foundational talk for me. So I was in this new country, never really had traveled to a new country in that way before. Speaking the language, this whole debate happened in Norwegian. Yeah. And so it was just, like, very eye-opening. It was a whole different perspective about life, and I felt like it was just like like, I don't know if it sounds like cringy, but like, it kind of like spoke to me a lot in like a new way. Like, I don't think I'd ever had like a moment where I like felt like I had been exposed to a new perspective in that way. Right. And I don't think that necessarily would have happened without the context of me spending my time learning this language, having the conversation in that language, being in that country. Like, all of those contributed to making it a more like heavy and impactful moment for me. And like, that's just one example that I think has, like, smaller examples of that same kind of effect have happened throughout my experience with languages. So I think that that's like just one of the things that is really beautiful and you can gain with languages.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, that was said beautifully, and I don't really have like a parallel experience to that was as sort of powerful or one that would convey like such a, like, kind of, not life-changing, or maybe life-changing, but just perspective altering kind of experience
I guess
in another country. But
do you at least though share the opinion that you think your kind of perspective on life is definitely influenced by the fact that you are like multicultural and speaking these languages? Because I feel like in my life, like, that's kind of like a somewhat defining thing at this point in some of my perspective. Yeah.
Right. No, I mean definitely, and I think especially since we're coming from the US, the whole world speaks English. It's just, that's kind of how it is. We're not. I don't think it has to feel, and it is our native language, but people speak English for sort of a very, just easy reason, just like, I need to get a job, right? And so I think when you speak with non-native English speakers about like learning English and sort of maybe getting into that kind of culture in the same way that you were getting into like Norwegian culture and media, it's just completely different. You're not, English is so pervasive in media and around the world as like a business language. And so I think, yeah, like being a Westerner who's learning Chinese, even though I look pretty Chinese, but I think it really kind of gave me the feeling that I could belong somewhere else, and in a way that I think you don't get if you don't try to really learn that language, because otherwise you're kind of stuck in a way, I guess.
Yeah, 100%. And I think
it just feels very static. Like life itself feels very static until you really like go try to go to another country, integrate into society, speak the language, and all that kind of stuff.
Right. Exactly. And I think that the other thing is simply that, like, what I've realized with learning languages is kind of like that. You're kind of forced to look at this new perspective in an open way, where it's like, as if you're an American and you just look at China generally, there are so many people that just have this negative connotation attached to all things China in their head, and like
improving recently.
Yeah, it's true, but don't really make any effort to sympathize with like the perspectives that people may have there, and kind of just villainize all of these like major differences where like safety is prioritized more than privacy, or there's a million other differences here.
Mm-hmm.
But I feel like once again, learning a language is kind of this thing where you're forced to have more appreciation for that other perspective, kind of inevitably. Like if you pour in the hours, like you could take I think you could take someone who's very anti-China, and if you could somehow, like obviously that person would not spend that time, but if you could somehow force that person through like thousands of hours of learning Chinese and being a part of the culture and etc., living there, talking to people, I think you would just realize that it's more people trying to live their life with like marginally, or I guess not marginally, much different circumstances that have led to different priorities in their life and different perspectives. And that's kind of like an unavoidable product of learning a language.
Right, yeah.
That I think is just universally good. Like I genuinely don't think you can't lose something from gaining more perspective. Like it's genuinely impossible, I think. Unless it's like, I guess the only example would be like, I don't know, if you like integrated with some country that has like very prejudiced values and then you started adopting them. Like, okay, like maybe that would be negative. But like generally probably the outcome is that I think that generally the outcome is that that's not going to be your conclusion. Your conclusion is that you're going to take like what you think are the things that speak to you the most from both cultures, which hopefully naturally are the positive things from both cultures, which it gets a little like hairy of like what is positive.
I like to think most people do,
Yeah, but exactly. I have faith that most people. I forget what's the who said that humans are inherently good versus inherently evil? Hobbes and someone else. I forget who was the guy who was inherently good versus inherently evil in the whatever Enlightenment times philosophers, but I tend to try and think that it's more inherently good. Once again, especially I just think that's the beautiful thing about like travel generally, but travel is a whole different level of travel when you speak the language, and it's again right. Like you just gain a new perspective, and that broadens your horizons and allows you to see things in a new way, and in all likelihood you're going to take the positives out of all of the different perspectives you've been presented, and then you're left as just like a more understanding, rational, probably kind person, which is a good thing at the end of the day.
I mean, this is a travel podcast at the end of the day, and I think, like I mentioned at the beginning of the episode, language learning kind of, at least from my perspective, has informed definitely your sort of interest in travel in other countries, but also like mine as well. And I think anyone who's really gone deep into learning a language just is going to know what it feels like to really have an appreciation of another culture. And so even if you're traveling to a country that you haven't studied the language, you're I just feel like you get hooked on sort of that feeling of really connecting with someone, and the people, and that's why you kind of want to keep traveling, and that's, I think, why we're so into it.
Right, 100%. That's what it is. Travel and language learning at the end of the day are just ways to connect with more people and more places and cultures. And like I said, I really don't see a world where I take something negative from it. I could go somewhere where I really don't like it, even like personally for my life. I could go somewhere I could never see myself or whatever that might be, but I still think I would take positive things from it. I think it's kind of this inevitable thing where just being exposed to people around the world makes you a better person in a lot of ways. If you have the right attitude about it. That's where you have some I don't know, like sometimes I see that you don't want to be a pretentious I don't know, sometimes I get annoyed with the people who are oh, I've been to every country, and they're just
right.
balling out everywhere, and I don't know, are those people a very worldly perspective? Maybe not, but I don't want to be an elitist with these things. So
I mean, yeah, we've shared our grievances on stuff like that,
right? So yeah, the general
people
call
continue
is,
to
yeah. But yeah. I don't know. My general call is just that travel and languages are basically universally good things to invest your time and money in some cases, and that's why I'm here. That's why we're talking. That's and I think it's a lot of the reason that we're good friends, because we kind of share that perspective and the perspective that comes along with all of that naturally.
Yeah, for sure. And speaking on people who got what they deserve, this is a huge pivot, but maybe next time, because I actually have wanted to talk about this with you post viewing, because we spoke a little bit about it, but Marty Supreme. We're not going to talk about it right now. We could talk about it next time, but it's not related to travel or anything, but I actually do want to talk about it, because I know we have. I think
it's slightly adjacent. It's slightly adjacent in some ways, and I do have thoughts. For sure.
All right, but yeah, we'll do that next time. For now, see you guys.
See you on the next one.